Hello and welcome to Art with Mr. P. This week we're painting. What fun. We're looking at a couple of the primary colours, and we're going to make variations of, or versions, lots of versions of secondary colours. We're going to be looking at Vincent van Gogh's artwork. There's a landscape. So we're looking at lots of mixings of blues and yellows to make green. Now, colour mixing and how light behaves is also part of the science curriculum. So we're getting 2 lessons for the price of 1 here. Now remember, these lessons are just starting points. If you do what I ask, brilliant. If you can do more, even more brilliant. Enough from me. Let's get on. Let's do it. So what we're looking at is Field Under Thunderclouds by Vincent van Gogh. Very interesting use of colour in this painting. Below the horizon we have these greens. Sometimes they're more yellow than green, and sometimes they're more blue than yellow. The only real obvious difference are a few dots of red almost in the middle. Above the horizon, we're looking at tints of blue. And what I'd like you to do is to experiment mixing these colours. Now, don't be too precious about it, and by that what I mean is don't worry about it too much if it looks like it's gone a bit wrong. I think we don't want too big a brush, and I'm going to go for these 2 brushes, which look like the same thing, but there we are. And they're not that big. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with the blue. Right, so I'll put some water on my brush into the blue. Now, when Vincent painted, I think the horizon is about there. When he painted, he used deliberate marks with his brush, shortish. Now, the Impressionists, who were painters about 140 years ago mostly, and a bit after, they painted in this way, and what they called this kind of painting, this using these small brush strokes, they called them taches, or fait des taches. Now, what that means in English are stains, made stains or small marks, just like that, les taches. Okay, so we're putting these in. And goes most of the blue. The blue goes a bit warmer and a bit darker down in this corner. So I've put a little bit of red into the blue, but only a little bit, because more purple paint will look like a darker version of the blue. Up we go, going up in the sky. Okay, so we've got these small painterly marks for the sky. Now, before it dries, I'm going to start putting some white in. And the problem with this white is you've got to put quite a lot on, So we've got some marks up here for the clouds, and the clouds are disappearing off over here. Some more clouds just here, and then there's some roundish, soft-looking clouds down near the horizon, like that, something like that. And what's quite nice about the way that Vincent uses his brush and creates these small painterly marks is that they kind of look like what you imagine if you could see the wind, what that might look like. Get a sense of the energy in the sky, yeah. The energy that the wind gives us. So it's small marks, blending these blues together. I think I'm going to pour out some more white and go over these clouds again. Okay, so I'm trying to get rid of the colour of the paper. It's not really part of the scheme. I guess what he was kind of doing here was trying to make the clouds look fluffy and light. Something like that. Okay, I'm going to thoroughly wash the brush out and make sure that it's dry. So now we need the greens, but bearing in mind that yellow tends to be quite pale, what I'm going to do is, and doesn't hold its colour very well, gets dominated by the blue, I'm going to put the yellow in first. So the bits on the painting where I think there's yellow, now I'm assuming you don't have a hard copy of this, seems a reasonable assumption. So you might want to look this up, this painting, on the internet before you start, and maybe have a copy of it there in front of you. So it's Field Under Thunderclouds by Vincent van Gogh. And for the spelling, have a look in the description of this video down below. Yeah? Okay, now I'm going to start adding some blue in here. And by adding the blue to the yellow like this, we're making greens. So we got a fairly light green now. And I think looking at the original, there's fairly light there. Now, in the class, we have talked about perspective. I talk about perspective all the time, you can imagine. And we've talked about how things look bigger. Now, the way Vincent van Gogh has shown this in his painting is by making the marks harder, yeah? And having a greater range of colours the closer to the viewer, so that lower down the page the marks look much more on purpose. Yeah, right, I'm going to add some more blue in here. We want a darker green. Okay, so we're putting more deliberate marks in here, I think. And then at the bottom, when we do get right to the bottom, yeah, there really are some very dark greens. Now, what I quite like about Vincent quite often is that he starts to put in what looks a bit like a pattern. So you see these green blobs here, presumably they're some kind of crop growing in a field. But can you see how they're a little bit more regular towards the bottom here? So really, what's quite interesting is all we've used for this picture, although we've got all these different colours, we've used a little bit of white, but we didn't necessarily need to. We've used blue and yellow, and that's it. And yet we've got all these different colours. And we're just using those three basic colours. And if you don't count the white, because we could have just left the paper colour, it's actually just two colours, which is quite remarkable, really. Really, it's just blue and yellow. Right, so down here, that not only does he get darker, so it looks closer, but he also puts the paint on a little bit thicker, try and make it look a bit more realistic. So this is his little tashes. Okay, I'm going to clean the brush again. Dry it off on the paper towel. I am going to get some more white. And I'm going to put some white where the clouds are. So we need to make these marks look a lot more on purpose, yeah, a lot more deliberate. So very, very famous for his very thick paint, which in the art world we call impasto. A very thick impasto. So when we're back at school, if I ask you, tell me something about Vincent van Gogh, you say, Vincent van Gogh, yeah, he loved thick impasto. I'm mixing white with a little bit of yellow because I've noticed that down at the bottom here, Vincent does actually use an almost creamy sort of green. So I am using white, definitely using white. So this whole picture is only made up of yellow, blue and white. And then the other colours you see here are the colours that we've mixed. There we are. And we've got on the horizon, we've got a little bit, maybe it's a forest or a hedge or something. Okay. And there is our version of Field Under Thunderclouds by Vincent van Gogh. Now, quite interesting, his use of colour, because you don't normally associate thunderclouds with blue sky. So I think it's fair enough to say that this is not particularly realistic. But there we are. I'm going to, do I put the red in? Why not? We'll add another colour then. But I only want little dots, so I'm going to use the wrong end of the brush. I'll put those in. Like that. Right, and now we really know which painting that's been inspired by. Lovely. Well done. So, as our starting point this week, we looked at Vincent van Gogh's Fields Under Thunderclouds. We looked at mixing blues and yellows to make greens. And from a scientific point of view, we've looked at how colours mix and how light behaves. Now remember, this is just a starting point. If you can do this, take this further, much better. Yeah. So the visual elements we've been preoccupied with this week, colours, lines, shapes, all sorts of wonderfulness. Next week, we're going to revisit collage. See you then.